So today we're going to talk about a virus that keeps popping up almost every year in South Asia. It's a pathogen that keeps public health officials up at night. It's called Nipah, and getting to know it is, well, it's key to understanding a really major global threat.
You know, this isn't just a scary headline. For the communities it hits, it's a recurring nightmare. Every single time Nipah shows up, it sends these shockwaves not just locally, but through the entire global health community. And the reason for that is pretty simple. When Nipah strikes, it is just devastatingly lethal.
And this is why. In some outbreaks, the fatality rate for Nipah can hit a staggering 75%. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. Up to 3 out of every 4 people who get infected can die. It's an absolutely brutal number.
To really get a handle on this modern threat, let's look at a super recent event. This isn't some dusty historical problem. This is happening right now. And the way the world responded to just 2 cases, it shows you just how seriously everyone is finally taking it. What's just amazing here is the speed of it all. I mean, look at that timeline. From the moment they got that official confirmation on January 13th, it took less than 48 hours for a national team to be on the ground, and the whole thing was declared contained in just 2 weeks. This is a huge testament to all the hard lessons learned from past epidemics.
The response was also, frankly, a masterclass in contact tracing. Officials managed to identify and track down 196 people who had come into contact with those 2 nurses, and here's the crucial part. Every single one of them tested negative. That is how you stop a killer virus dead in its tracks before it can start a real chain reaction.
Okay, so the response was impressive, right? But what exactly were they fighting? Let's zoom in and take a closer look at the virus itself, because you really need to understand it to see why even 2 cases can cause such worldwide alarm.
To really grasp the stakes here, you have to put it in perspective. We all remember the fear around Ebola and, of course, COVID-19. Well, look at this. Nipah's average fatality rate is often higher than Ebola's, and in some outbreaks, it's way, way deadlier. It's in a completely different league when it comes to lethality.
And here's something that's really tough to think about. Even for the lucky few who survive, the battle might not be over. About 20% of survivors are left with serious, persistent neurological damage. We're talking seizures, major personality changes. This virus can leave a truly devastating mark.
When you look at its features, you start to see why Nipah is such a master of deception and, well, terror. It can start out looking just like the flu, which delays diagnosis. But then, bam, it can progress to a coma in just 24 to 48 hours. Its super long incubation period makes finding all the contacts a complete nightmare. And maybe the most chilling part of all, it can lie dormant and then just reactivate, years after someone thought they were in the clear.
So where on earth does a frightening virus like this come from? Well, like so many new diseases we're seeing, its story starts in the animal kingdom. To really understand the threat, we have to follow its journey, all the way from its natural home into the human population. Okay, the key concept you need to know here is zoonotic spillover. Nipah lives totally naturally inside these big fruit bats, also known as flying foxes. The crazy thing is, the bats don't get sick from it at all, but they can shed the virus in their saliva, their urine, their droppings, creating all these little opportunities for it to jump to another species like us.
In places like Bangladesh and parts of India, this is how it usually happens. During the winter, there's this really popular drink made from raw, sweet date palm sap. Well, the bats are attracted to the collection pots. They contaminate the sap, and then people who drink it uncooked get infected. It's a tragic and very direct pathway from bat to human. But that's not the only way it gets around. The very first big outbreak back in Malaysia actually involved a middleman, so to speak. Deforestation pushed the bats into fruit orchards, where they dropped contaminated fruit that was then eaten by pigs. The pigs then became what's called an amplifying host, meaning the virus just replicated like crazy inside them, and they spread a huge amount of it to farm workers. It just shows you how dangerously adaptable this virus is.
So why does this keep happening in South Asia? It's really not a coincidence. The region is facing this unique combination of factors that basically creates a perfect storm for Nipah to emerge again and again.
It's really a 4-part problem. First, you've got huge numbers of people living packed together, often close to wildlife. Then you've got massive deforestation, which is squeezing bats and people closer and closer. Third, you've got climate change stressing out the bats, which can make them shed even more of the virus. And finally, you have cultural practices, like drinking the raw sap, that create these perfect transmission routes. It's a complex and really dangerous mix.
And once that virus makes the jump to a person, another huge risk factor kicks in. As Dr. Stephen Luby points out, hospitals in places with fewer resources can actually become hotspots themselves. And this is exactly what we see with Nipah, where healthcare workers or other patients get infected and a single case suddenly turns into a much bigger outbreak. So this all leads to the big question, right? You're probably thinking, if we've known about this virus for over 25 years, why don't we have an approved vaccine or a cure? Well, the answer is, it's a frustrating mix of really tough science and, frankly, economics.
This is where it gets super tricky. To fight Nipah, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. The scientific problem is that the virus is just too dangerous to study easily. You need the world's highest security labs. And because the outbreaks are so sporadic, testing a vaccine the traditional way is almost impossible. One estimate said a trial would take over 500 years. Then you have the economic problem. The virus mostly hits low-income countries, so there's not a big financial incentive for drug companies to pour money into it.
But that's where the story is starting to change. Groups like CEPI, that's the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, have stepped in to fill that exact gap. They've put up over $100 million for Nipah research, which makes them the biggest funder in this space by far, and it's dramatically speeding up the work.
And all that investment, it is absolutely paying off. For the first time ever, there is real, tangible hope. We now have 2 different vaccine candidates that are in phase 2 clinical trials. That means they're being tested on hundreds of people to see if they're safe and if they work. This is a massive, massive step forward in the race for a vaccine.
So as we wrap this up, what's the big picture here? What does this constant, simmering threat teach us about getting ready for the next pandemic, whatever it might be and wherever it might come from?
Okay, first, let's be crystal clear. For most of us watching this, the personal risk of ever getting Nipah is basically zero. But the lessons it teaches us are universal. The real root causes here are ecological: habitat loss, climate change. It tells us that true preparedness isn't just about reacting faster, it's about preventing these spillovers in the first place. And that means that global health security really begins with making sure local clinics on the front lines have what they need.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. The January 2026 outbreak was contained, which is great, but the virus, it's still out there, living in the bats. So another outbreak isn't a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. The progress on vaccines is incredible, it's hopeful, but the ecological pressures pushing bats and people together are only getting worse. So the real question is, will we do what's actually necessary to be truly ready for the next one?